Cautious.
Cautious. Being careful about what you say or do, especially to avoid danger or mistakes, not taking any risks. For example, the government has been cautious in its response to the report.
Chase.
Chase. To run, drive, etc. after somebody, something in order to catch them or it. For example, chase somebody, something.
Citizenship. The legal right to belong to a particular country. For example, they were granted full French citizenship.
Collapse.
Collapse. A sudden failure of something, such as an institution, a business or a course of action. For example, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Collision. An accident in which two vehicles or people crash into each other. For example, collision between A and B.
Consider. To think about something carefully, especially in order to make a decision. For example, I'd like some time to consider.
Consideration. The act of thinking carefully about something. For example, an employer is legally bound to give due consideration to the request.
Constraint. A thing that limits something, or limits your freedom to do something. For example, constraints of time/money/space.
Construct. To build or make something such as a road, building or machine. For example, construct something.
Construction. The process or method of building or making something, especially roads, buildings, bridges, etc. For example, construction began this year and will take approximately 18 months.
Consume. To use something, especially fuel, energy, or time. For example, the electricity industry consumes large amounts of fossil fuels.
Counselor. A person who has been trained to advise people with problems, especially personal problems. For example, I went to see a debt counselor, and she agreed to come to the bank with me.
Counter. A long flat surface over which goods are sold or business is done in a shop, bank, etc. For example, behind the counter.
Crash.
Crash. An accident in which a vehicle hits something, for example another vehicle, usually causing damage and often injuring or killing the passengers. For example, a car or plane crash.
Crash.
Crash. An accident in which a vehicle hits something, for example another vehicle, usually causing damage and often injuring or killing the passengers. For example, a car or plane crash.
Creep. To move slowly, quietly, and carefully, because you do not want to be seen or heard. For example, I crept up the stairs. Crew. All the people working on a ship, plane, etc. For example, crew members.
Cycle.
Cycle. To ride a bicycle, to travel by bicycle. For example, measures to encourage more people to cycle.
Deal. To give cards to each player in a game of cards. For example, whose turn is it to deal?
Decide.
Decide. To think carefully about the different possibilities that are available and choose one of them. For example, it's up to you to decide.
Deck. The top outside floor of a ship or boat. For example, on deck. Dentist.
Dentist. A person whose job is to take care of people's teeth. For example, to see/visit/consult your dentist.
Department.
Department. A section of a large organization such as a government, business, university, etc. For example, department of something.
Diamond.
Diamond. A clear precious stone of pure carbon, the hardest substance known. Diamonds are used in jewelry and also in industry, especially for cutting glass. For example, a diamond ring or necklace.
Direct.
Direct. Without stopping or changing direction or vehicle. For example, direct to something.
Directory.
Directory. A book or electronic resource containing lists of information, usually in alphabetical order, for example people's phone numbers or the names and addresses of businesses in a particular area. For example, a telephone/trade directory.
Discard.
Discard. To get rid of something that you no longer want or need. For example, discard somebody something.
Discipline.
Discipline. The practice of training people to obey rules and orders and punishing them if they do not. The controlled behavior or situation that is the result of this training. For example, the school has a reputation for high standards of discipline. Dog. An animal with 4 legs and a tail, often kept as a pet or trained for work, for example hunting or guarding buildings. There are many types of dog, some of which are wild. For example, I took the dog for a walk.
Downtown.
Downtown. In, towards, or typical of the center of a city, especially its main business area. For example, a downtown store.
Downtown.
Downtown. In, towards, or typical of the center of a city, especially its main business area. For example, a downtown store.
Downtown.
Downtown. In, towards, or typical of the center of a city, especially its main business area. For example, a downtown store.
Drive.
Drive. A journey in a car or other vehicle. For example, let's go for a drive.
Drive.
Drive. A journey in a car or other vehicle. For example, let's go for a drive.
Driver.
Driver. A person who drives a vehicle. For example, a bus/train/taxi driver.
Driving.
Driving. Strong and powerful, having a strong influence in making something happen. For example, who is the driving force equals the person with the strongest influence in the band.
Earth. The world, the planet that we live on. For example, the planet Earth.
Editorial. Connected with the task of preparing something such as a newspaper, a book or a television or radio program, to be published or broadcast. For example, the magazine's editorial staff.
Efficient.
Efficient. Doing something in a good, careful and complete way with no waste of time, money or energy. For example, a highly efficient worker.
Efficiently.
Efficiently. In a good and careful way, with no waste of time, money or energy. For example, a very efficiently organized event.
Elaborate.
Elaborate. Very complicated and detailed, carefully prepared and organized. For example, elaborate designs.
Embark. To get onto a ship or plane, to put somebody/something onto a ship or plane. For example, we stood on the pier and watched as they embarked.
Engine.
Engine. The part of a vehicle that produces power to make the vehicle move. For example, a diesel or petrol engine.
Engineer.
Engineer. A person whose job involves designing and building engines, machines, roads, bridges, etc. For example, we worked with a team of scientists and engineers.
Engineering.
Engineering. The activity of applying scientific knowledge to the design, building and control of machines, roads, bridges, electrical equipment, etc. For example, the bridge is a triumph of modern engineering.
Entrepreneur. A person who makes money by starting or running businesses, especially when this involves taking financial risks. For example, a creative entrepreneur.
Episode.
Episode. One part of a story that is broadcast on television or radio in several parts. For example, the next episode has not yet been filmed.
Evaluate.
Evaluate. To form an opinion of the amount, value, or quality of something after thinking about it carefully. For example, evaluate something.
Evaluation. The act of forming an opinion of the amount, value, or quality of something after thinking about it carefully. For example, an evaluation of the healthcare system.
Executive.
Executive. A person who has an important job as a manager of a company or an organization. For example, company/corporate/business/industry executives. Exit. A way out of a public building or vehicle. For example, where's the exit? Exit. A way out of a public building or vehicle. For example, where's the exit?
Expert.
Expert. A person with special knowledge, skill, or training in something. For example, a legal/security/medical/computer expert.
Fare. The money that you pay to travel by bus, plane, taxi, etc. For example, bus/taxi fares.
File. A box or folded piece of card for keeping loose papers together and in order. For example, a box file.
Finance.
Finance. To provide money for a project. For example, finance something.
Fishing.
Fishing. The sport or business of catching fish. For example, they often go fishing.
Fleet. A group of military ships commanded by the same person. For example, a fleet of destroyers.
Folding.
Folding. That can be folded so that it can be carried or stored in a small space. For example, a folding chair/bike/knife.
Free. Without payment. For example, children under 5 travel free.